Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to connect here with us today. My name is Marita. I'm a customer support team member here at Jane. So I spend most of my days on our live support channels, that's phones, chats, and emails, connecting with many wonderful practitioners and admin team members such as yourselves, and helping to navigate through Jane. So I've been on the support team for a little over a year, and prior to that, I was a registered massage therapist working in a multidisciplinary collaborative care clinic that actually used Jane. So I spent about 2 years in that clinic by myself, fawning over Jane's amazing charting features. So I am really excited to be here with you today to be able to show you some of those things. We know that charting is an aspect of practice that's often very time consuming. And let's face it, most of you probably didn't go into practice because you were hoping to spend most of your days charting. So we're really excited to show you some of the ways that you can speed that up using Jane. So I'll pass it over to Katie to introduce herself.
Thanks, Marita. Hi, friends. My name is Katie. I am also part of the Jane support team, but I'm over on the US side. So if you've ever called with one of those tricky insurance or billing questions, you might have chatted with me before. I come from a customer success and legal admin background, and I'm also really excited to go through the tips and tricks we have for you today to help speed up your charting process. Like Marita said, charting is such an important part of every practitioner's workload. It's not only making sure that your patients are getting the best level of care, but it's more often than not a legal requirement. I always recommend checking in with those local governing bodies in your state or province to learn more about what those legal requirements might be. Then, after today's session, you'll know how to not only comply with Jane's charting features, but also save time so you can focus on that patient experience. Back to you, Marita.
Exactly. So today we're going to cover the basics of charting for those who um, might enjoy a quick refresher, or for those who are brand new to Jane. And then once we're done with that, we're going to go into some of the more advanced features that you might not have known about, as well as some of our favorite tips and tricks to help you save some time in your daily charting in Jane. So let's get right into it. I'm going to jump over into our demo clinic here. The first thing that I want to go over is building templates in your staff profile. So there's two types of templates available here. The first type is from the community in the template library, and the other is built and saved by you. To start, let's check out that template library. So if you don't already know about this, it's a treasure trove of charts, templates that have been created by other Jane users who use it every day in their practices. So these clinics have chosen to share these entries because they think it would be helpful for other practices. We have it categorized by discipline here, but if there's ever a specific template that you're looking for, there's a search bar at the top. You can search within disciplines, or you can just search overall in here. So in this case, I'm going to just quickly type in for a soap note here. When I do that, Jane is going to pull up a whole list of different options here for me based on entries that previous clinics have shared. If I click into an entry, I'll be able to look and see a preview of it. If it looks like something that might be useful for my practice, I can pull it in and start modifying it for my own. So if there's something that I don't quite like about it, I can change that once I bring it into my own template library. If I'm looking at an entry and I'm like, this actually isn't at all what I need, no problem. We can just kind of continue on through the list until you find something that works for you. So there are a ton of different entries in here. There's thousands and thousands of entries. So if you're ever looking for like a specific assessment that you're wanting to pull in as a template, you can search in here. And oftentimes we will have that available already. So PHQ-9 pulls up pretty easy there. So now let's jump in and start creating a template of our own. So if I click a new template in the upper right-hand corner here, I'll be able to go in and start creating something. I have already started a little creation here, so let's jump in and take a look at some of the chart parts that are available for you. So when you first come into a template here, you'll be able to add in items. I've already added some in, and we can take a look at what those include. So first field we have here is a chief complaint. It's just an open field that I can type text into. Similarly, we have note boxes, basically the difference between those two being the title on it, which can also be modified. So if I want to change how this shows up here, I can click in and I can modify that label that appears here. You can also pre-populate text. So if you are wanting to input, say you are doing like manual assessments and you wanted to input your lid 4 here, you can just type that in and it will automatically pop up in any chart that you pull it into. So a couple different options there for you. We do also have headings to help you organize your templates. So if there's particular sections that you want to break things out into, you can use the headings for that. We have slider scales available for you, and you can modify the labels that appear on those, as well as the default options. So in this case, we're defaulting to number 5, and you'll see that showing up here. And then we have checkboxes. So checkboxes are a really great resource if there are particular entries that you're making a lot in your charts and you want to just be able to quickly go through and knock things off the list. So for manual therapists, that might be something like, a list of muscles, or it could be for any practitioner, really, a list of diagnoses that you can select here. When you input checkboxes, you have a number of different options. So you'll be able to come in and choose how you want them organized on your page. So I'm moving it right now from vertical to horizontal. So it shows up a little bit differently, a little bit more condensed for me, depending on my preferences. I can obviously also go in and modify all of the options that are available for me. I can add or delete options from that area. And then I can also choose, say, if I want to include notes. So if I select that option and save, when I tick a box off, I'll also be able to add additional notes related to that particular checkbox here. Maybe I don't find that I need that, but what I do want is a nice clean chart entry at the end of my day. I can choose to hide any unchecked checkboxes after I sign off on that chart entry to help keep things nice and clean looking. So let's turn that one on. And then the final option that you have here for checkboxes, which you have for a lot of the different chart parts in Jane, is the ability to make a particular part required. So if there's a piece of information that you're like, I really need this information before I sign off on my chart entry for the day, you can go in and click to make it required. If you try to sign an entry and it hasn't yet been, like you haven't inputted anything into that field, Jane is going to flag that for you so that you can remember to go back and add that information. I'm going to go ahead and save here, and then we can kind of continue on down. So there's a few pieces that I'll go into a little bit more detail when we get into the actual creating an entry for your charting. But one option that we do have available here is the body chart. And what I'll note here is this is an image that you can draw over top of and add notes onto. You can change this image. So Jane has this preset body chart, but if you wanted to input any other file, you can do that. You just click on it to open it up. You can go in and select your file and say instead I wanted it to be more of a range of motion chart. I can do that, click of a button, and I'm good to go. Similarly, we have the spine diagram here. So you can draw over top of the spine diagram. It has its own checkboxes built in for the various levels of the vertebrae. And then you can also add notes on the right-hand side here. So you can kind of quickly denote your adjustments for the day. And then you could add additional notes, say around like your soft tissue mobilizations or something like that. For our medical aesthetics community out there specifically, but it can be helpful for a lot of different practices, we have what are called side-by-side. Now, this will be a little bit clearer when we get into the actual chart entry itself, but essentially side-by-side allows you to put two images next to each other, and then you can draw over top of those images, much like the body chart and the spine diagram. When you set up your side-by-side, you get to choose what your captions are on those two images, as well as where you want them positioned on the screen. And then you can choose if you want your labels to show up as well. For the optometrists in the room, we also have optical measurements fields available here. And then we have instructions. So if you're new to practice and you kind of want little reminders about things, instructions are a really great way to do that as you go through your chart entry. These particular pieces of an entry aren't going to show up when you sign off on it. So it's kind of like a safe way for you to give yourself a little bit of a note to remind yourself. We also have drop-down menus, so you can click into the drop-down and you'll be able to select from the list of options that you populate in this area. And then we have what are called smart options and narratives. So these ones are a little bit more complex, and I'll show you how we can build one out. But once we're actually in the chart entry, I'll also show you this one, just so you can see how it looks as a final draft. With smart options and narratives, what you can do is list series of variables next to subjects so that you can quickly denote your observations about something. So I'm going to go ahead and add in one here, and we can click into edit it. The first thing that we can do here is label it. So in this case, I'm going to say that this is patient's subjective report. And then we can choose our style. So whether you want it to show it as checkboxes, as buttons, as dropdowns, whichever. So I'm going to select buttons in this case, and then I'm going to display just the selected options that I choose when I sign off on my entry. And then I can input some subjects. So maybe I want to track like pain intensity, and I want to track pain duration. And I also want some information about pain frequency. So those are my subjects. And then I also have my choices here. So worse, better, and the same. I'm going to go ahead and click save. And now you'll see that that automatically updates as soon as I click that save button. When I am actually in my chart entry, I'll be able to go in and select my options here. And then Jane is going to save those particular selections that you make. Now we can also set it up so that we create a narrative, but I'll go into a little bit more detail when we actually are in the chart entry here. We do also have the ability to add in sketches as well. So if you're more of like an old school practitioner, you're like, I have been paper charting for life, and I don't really want to do the whole digital thing. You could just input a sketch pad here, and you can use your tablet and stylus to just write out your notes just as you normally would. You can also use this like if there's something that you're wanting to draw out for your clients, but still have it in their chart entry, you can do that here as well. So that's essentially building out your template. So one couple things I want to note here. You always want to make sure that you save whatever template you create, but you also have the option with any template that you create to share it to the chart template library. So if there's a particular template that you make and you're like, I am very proud of this and I think other people should see it, or you're like, this would be really helpful for other people to have as well, you can click that button to share. Jane's going to collect a few pieces of information from you, and then you'll be able to go ahead and share it to the library. It'll then be available to all other Jane users to pull in as their own templates. Now, if they do choose to pull it into their own profile, it's not going to affect the entry that you have. So if they're modifying it, it's not going to modify it on your end. So no worries that way. So I'm going to go ahead and save our chart template here, and then we can jump into another staff member's profile. So it's automatically available for me because I created it, but other practitioners in my clinic might also think that that's a useful template for them. So they can jump into their own profile here and then go ahead and enable it for themselves. And then they'll be able to pull it into those chart entries. So now that we have our templates all ready, let's go and see them in action. I'm going to jump over into the day tab here. And you'll notice that in the day tab, we have a number of icons that show up on the right-hand side here. Closed locked icons mean that we have completed a chart entry and signed off on it, whereas the open lock icon means that I have started a chart draft, but I haven't yet signed that entry. Now you might be saying, Marita, sometimes I start a chart draft, but I don't see that little unlocked icon showing up on my schedule here. Like what's going on with that? And the reason for that is because we've actually gone in through the clients tab instead at the top here. And then we've added in our chart entry that way. So if I go ahead and create a chart entry in here, and then I jump back over to my day tab. So we've created an entry for Aubrey on March 28th. If I jump back over into the day tab, oh, I guess I did actually go in through the appointment. So I went in through the appointment and it created that entry. If I had actually gone in through the client tab here and created the entry, it wouldn't be associating it with an appointment. Now, if that ever happens and you're like, I am sure I started an entry, you go in, you see that there is an entry in there for you, you can reassociate it with that appointment. So if you're not seeing this little calendar icon, it means that that particular entry isn't associated with an appointment yet. We can associate it by clicking the little drop down arrow here, and we'll be able to go in and either add an appointment or in this case, change that appointment. And we can select the appropriate appointment from the list here. For my US clinics out there, this is really important, especially when you're looking at adding your billing codes into your chart entries, which Katie's going to go over a little bit later. But this essentially allows Jane to know for which visit we should be applying those billing codes. And then any entry that does not yet have a started draft is not going to have any icon here. So when you actually go into a profile, you have the option of searching your chart entries. So say there were, I wanted to just kind of quickly refresh myself on a particular issue that a client has been having. I can go in and search through my entries here. Maybe they've been dealing with some bruising and I want to find the entries related to that. I can pull that up that way, and Jane's going to read through those charts and let me know like these 3 entries have that included in them. If I want to view them all at one time, I can click my little expand all button on the right-hand side, and they're all going to open up for me. And then when I'm all done, I can go ahead and collapse. And then I can start my entry for the day. So in the upper right-hand corner here, I'll click the new chart entry button, and then I can use one of the templates that I've already created here. You can type into your open text fields here. So I'm just going to go ahead and add some details in. And then with our sliders, we can also select our options from those. So I'm going to move my slider over to a 7 in this case. For my muscular palpation, I'm going to select a few options. Again, I've selected so that those options that I don't choose are going to disappear when I'm all done. Now looking at that body chart, so we had uploaded the range of motion image here. You're now seeing that I have the option to modify that image, so I can draw over top of it. So if I select my pencil icon, I can then select the size that I want my pencil to be, as well as the color that I want. So let's say in this case, I'm going to use red and we're just going to go medium size. I can add in my denotations here. And then if there's a particular note that I'm wanting to input that I don't necessarily want to write on top of this because maybe my handwriting's not the best, I can use this little pointer tool and add in that note here. So perhaps this client was feeling extreme pain at end range. Now that note is associated with that particular dot, and I can quickly review those details. If I make a mistake, I can always undo things, or I can go ahead and clear everything on that body chart. Similar with the spine diagram here. So again, you can draw in, you can come in and erase things. You can select your options for your adjustment levels. And as I mentioned before, you can also add in some additional notes on the right-hand side here as well. For that side by side, so we can add in our images here. So I'm going to go ahead and select my first image, and then I can input my second image here. And if there's any details or notes that I want to make just with the spine diagram and the body chart, I have all of those same options available here. Now, in terms of drop down, so if I click on a drop down menu, I'm going to be able to go in and select my options here. And then the smart options and narratives. So I mentioned that we would kind of circle back to this because we have the option for that narrative piece. So if it's just the smart options, I just select my options here and I'm going to see those like options, pain intensity with worse showing up, pain duration with the same showing up, and pain frequency with better showing up. But maybe instead of having them show up as these boxes, I actually want to build out a sentence based on the selections that I've made. Smart options and narratives allow you to do that. So in this first example here, I can go in and select my options next to each of my subjects. And you'll notice that as I'm doing that, Jane is creating a sentence below based on those selections. So I'm just going to go ahead and add all of this in here. When I go to save my chart entry, this section is going to disappear and I'm going to be left just with that narrative that has been built out here. So kind of a quick way to very quickly go in and add a full sentence in without having to type it out yourself. Now, again, the sketch pad, much like the body chart, spine diagram, you can draw over top of this just as you did with those previous sections. Couple other things I want to note here that I didn't sort of bring up in the template area is you can add items in on the fly. So if you have a template that you've started, and generally that template works, but for whatever reason in this session, something is coming up that I think I want to add in an extra item, I can go ahead and insert that item here. So maybe that's that your client has brought in a list of medications that they want added into their chart or that you want to add into their chart. You can go ahead and upload an image here. The great thing about the files area is that if you're working on an iPad or an iPhone, I don't know who would be charting on an iPhone or tablet device, you can take an image directly from your device and have it come into this area so you don't ever have to store it locally on your device. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and choose a file and bring it into this entry here. So that's now on file. I'll also have access to it in my files area here as well. Another thing that might come up, potentially say a client comes in and they're having chest pain and I want to take vitals. I can go in and quickly add in my vitals here instead. And then a third option that you have, well, you have many options, but another option that you have here is actually what we call block charting. So if there is an assessment associated with something that somebody is reporting, say for my medical, or sorry, for my counseling practices out there, somebody comes in and mentions something related to, say, self-harm. That might prompt me that I actually want to do a risk assessment on them. So I'm going to go ahead and build in my risk assessment to the chart entry that I have created, and I can kind of go through that piece of the assessment. So it's not something that we're going to necessarily want to include in every chart, so we don't build it out in the template, but we can sort of pull it in as needed. Now, when I'm all done with my chart entry for the day, I can go ahead and click to sign it at the bottom here. As soon as I do, Jane is going to lock in that entry with a date and timestamp associated with that signature. So moving forward, anytime I want to change an entry, it'll be marked as an amendment with its own date and timestamp. I can choose sort of the default viewership that I want on my chart entries generally, but at any time I can update that viewership. So if I want to share this with somebody else in the clinic, I can do that from this area here. I can also choose if I want to make a particular entry visible to my client. So say for whatever reason, somebody comes in and you're like, I think it would be helpful for you to have access to this particular entry. I can click that button and it's going to show up for them in their My account. So they're going to get an email letting them know that their clinician has shared a document with them, and they'll be able to come in and view that entry for themselves here. Oftentimes, we might find that session to session, clients are coming in for sort of similar reasons, and we might not want to start our chart entries from scratch every single time. Jane has a duplicate button available for you. If you click on that button, it's going to take the chart entry and all the information that you just inputted and create a separate copy for today's date. I can then modify it as needed, and it's not going to affect the original entry. So if I need to move things around, add things in, delete things out, I can do that. And when I'm all done and happy with that, I can go ahead and click to sign again, and it's going to get saved as its own entry. You're also able to, if for any reason you need to, update the title on an entry that you're creating. So if I go ahead and create an entry here, I can click and modify the title on it. Maybe I don't want it showing up as that. I want it showing up as an initial assessment instead. I can input that here. And then I can go ahead and click that little checkbox, and that title is going to get saved for me. One final thing that I wanted to point out here. So you have the ability, we do get lots of questions about this. You have the ability to print any individual chart entry from the bottom of that entry. You can also export it as a PDF if you prefer. But if you want a series of entries for your client, say you have a lawyer's office calling and they're wanting sort of a full report of the client, you can go in and actually filter your entries by a number of different parameters. So whether it's a specific discipline, a specific staff member, the date range. So if I'm wanting everything for this year for this client, I can go in and filter by that. And then on the right-hand side, I have the option to either export it as a PDF or print it. If I export as a PDF, Jane is going to take me to a screen here where I can go in and view that PDF file. From this area, I have both the options to download and print it as well. So whichever option you select, you can still print it. If I jump over and select the print button instead, I actually get a couple different options for that one. So I can just view it as a chart, or I can change it to letterhead and have it show up that way instead. Again, from this area, I can either send it as a PDF or I can print it off here. All right, Katie, I know that you had wanted to chat about treatment plans and how practitioners and clinics can ensure that they have completed all their unsigned charts. So I'll hand it over to you from here.
Absolutely. Thanks, Marita. That was great. Yes, let's definitely talk about treatment plans. I'm going to take us through this lovely new section of Jane. Perfect. So let's chat a little bit about treatment plans. This feature came out last year, so it might be new to a few of our watchers. Treatment plans help you organize your chart entries and track the number of appointments for a patient specific concern, help you keep an eye on that plan of care and where we're at. Now, it's important to note that the treatment plan function is specific to insurance plans in Jane currently, and that is because it does rely on having billing and diagnosis codes in the account in order to set up that plan. So, something to note there. But if we do have that enabled, you'll see that you have a new treatment plan button in the chart section of your patient's profile. So, let's look at creating our first treatment plan here. I'm going to click on this, and let's say that my patient is having some shoulder issues that we're working through, or maybe some low back pain. When I'm creating my treatment plan, I can change the default name to track the area of concern that we're working through. And I can also add up to 3 diagnosis codes as part of this treatment plan. So maybe we want to add that low back pain diagnosis code, or we're looking for the lower lumbar. We can pull all that in. And I can also set up the suggested number of visits. So for this patient, we're going to work through 5 appointments and we're going to create that treatment plan. Once I do, it creates this folder where I can group those chart entries together related to that area of concern and also keep an eye on how many appointments we're at with that plan of care. So in this case, if I want to create a chart entry related to this treatment plan, I can click on my actions button here and create a new entry. I can then pull from one of my existing templates, pop that in, and work my way through my actual chart entry here. Another thing to note is that now that this chart entry is in the treatment plan and tied to this data service, I can also go ahead and mark this appointment as arrived. Once I do, Jane is going to give it a quick refresh and it's going to reflect that we have 1 of 5 appointments completed. I can go ahead and make my chart entries from here. I can also move any unassigned chart entries into the plan. So if I have previous notes that are going to be part of that, I can come into my little drop down arrow here, move it over to the plan, and there we go. You can create more than one treatment plan at a time. And you can also close a plan if needed. Maybe we don't need as many sessions for this issue. We can go ahead and close that out. Perfect. So now that we have some of our chart entries organized, how do we keep track of where we're at with all of our previous charts and that we've completed them all? Well, for that, we have a specific report, and I'll bring you there now. So I'm going to jump into my reports tab and head over to appointments. This report will allow you to sort by location, staff member, date range, or state, as well as chart status. So if we need to keep an eye on which appointments need to have chart entries created, which ones are still in a draft state, and which ones have been signed, this is going to do the trick for me. So I can see at a glance, all of these appointments don't yet have a chart entry associated with that data service. So we probably want to go in and tidy those up. But I do have a draft created here that needs signing, and I can scroll through and find any that have been signed and completed so that I can confirm that. Now, the other nice part about the treatment plans and keeping an eye on where you're at with your chart entries is that we've also created a new dedicated report to help you track that as well. So you'll find in your report section, there is a new heading for care, and we have our brand new treatment plans report located in here. I can pull this open and search up a specific diagnosis code if I want to see how many patients are working through a treatment plan for a specific issue. I can also filter by open or closed plans as well as any specific staff members. This will allow me to see what clients have treatment plans that are open, the name of those plans, as well as the diagnosis codes, where they're at in their visits, and the most recent appointments, as well as the first one. Another big feature that I absolutely love and that I've seen a lot of interest in the chat about today is phrases. If you've ever looked for a macro, an autofill, phrases is the trick for you. So let's take a look at how we can set that up. I'm going to head into my staff profile, and you'll see that there is a tab for phrases on the right-hand side here. When I go in, I have a few that have already been created in our demo clinic, but I can set up a new one fresh for myself. So maybe I'm looking to create another version of the patient is showing signs of improvement. We'll just use the same text to look at the functionality here. So I can type in my keyword shortcut here, as well as the phrase that this needs to represent. This can be as long as you need it to be, or as short, just depending on what you would like to have Jane insert when you're using this for charting. So go ahead and save that. Now, for my US billing friends, this is also a nice little trick to be able to quickly add specific billing or diagnosis codes to a patient's chart in that correct formatting in order to be able to update the billing. So let's say I have a set of codes that I know I always need for initial visits, and that's going to be my shortcut here. I'm going to add a couple of billing codes with that hashtag or pound sign that we always need to have for charting purposes. And I'm going to type in a 97001. Jane knows what I'm looking for, and I can add that right in with the correct formatting. We'll do a couple extra ones here just to round this out. Perfect. And a 98941. Beautiful. So this is all formatted correctly. I can go ahead and save this. It's added and ready for me to use. So let's see this in action. And I'm going to jump back to our day tab and that same patient that we saw previously. So in here, I'm going to create a new chart entry, and I'm going to find one of my note boxes here. I can start to type in the backslash and the shortcut that I'm looking for. Jane is going to pull up that prompt, and I can click on that and just have it fill in all of that text for me. You can also save a phrase from a chart entry. So if you're typing something out and you think, oh gosh, this would be great to have as a quick reference for later, you can actually highlight that text and you'll see that Jane gives you the option to save it as a phrase. So you can do it from your chart entries as well. This will also work for that billing code phrase that we created earlier. So if I want to pop in those initial evaluation codes, I can click on that and it's going to fill that in for me automatically as well. Because we formatted it with that hashtag or pound sign in the phrase, it will now allow me to come down to the bottom to that edit billing code section and be able to update the appointment with those relevant codes. I can also add any diagnosis codes as well. All right, perfect. So that's some of my favorite quick tips. Marita, I'm going to pass it back to you. What are your favorite charting tips to help practitioners stay organized?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I love this question so much, Katie. So, one of the features that I used a lot when I was in clinic is the medical alert feature here. Now, when we add in a medical alert, what this is going to do is flag it at the top of a chart entry or a chart area for a client. So that I can see really quickly really important information about a client without having to scroll through any of my chart entries. I can also make this available to other practitioners. So if I'm in a collaborative care clinic and I add in that medical alert, they're going to be able to see this. So maybe it's something that a client has let me know about, but they haven't necessarily seen another practitioner, and I want to make sure that that's flagged on their end chart. I can do that here. Um, we also see this used in a lot of clinics for sort of a delight aspect of practice. So maybe it's not necessarily something medical related, but it's something that's important to the client. So, you know, they're going away on a vacation and you want to check in about that vacation when they get back, or you want your other team members to know about that vacation so that they can check in. We can also flag those sorts of details at the top here. And then another feature that I found really helpful is the pinning feature in Jane. So if there are pieces of information within particular chart entries that I want to keep track of, I can pin them to the top of the charting area here. And then I can also choose to color code them. So I'll show you what this looks like. If I go down to a particular entry and open it up, for any of the parts that I have listed in here, you'll see as I scroll on the right-hand side, I get that little 3-dot icon. I can choose to go in and pin a particular item. As soon as I do, it's going to show up at the top here, and then I can color code it as I'd like. Jane also gives you the option when you do pin something to be able to click really quickly and go and view that chart entry. So this can be really helpful for tracking client progress over time. But one other thing that I did want to show you in relation to that is our ability to build out outcome measures or collect surveys from our clients. So if I jump into Aubrey's profile here, and on the right-hand side, scroll down, there's a section called surveys. If there's information that I'm wanting to collect from a client, say on a regular basis, I want to check in, have them fill in a quick survey for me, I can set that up in this area. So you can set up as many different surveys as you want in your Jane account. And then when you come to profiles, you're able to set those up on a particular profile. You just click on that button here to set up. You can select the options that you have here and then save them onto the profile. You can also choose sort of the end date that you want that assessment to go out for. So say in this case, I want this to go out every week at 8 a.m. For a month. I can go ahead and save that onto the client profile. I'll also be able to come into this area and view if there have been any surveys completed by the client. And if there have, so for this one here, the PHQ-9, it looks like the client has already submitted one. I can go ahead and click on that, and Jane is going to take me into the client's chart area, and I can review the details of those surveys. You'll also notice on a closed survey, you automatically get that little tally here on the right-hand side. So if you do want to score a survey, you'll be able to do that as well. What about you, Katie? What are some of your favorite tips and tricks?
Yes, absolutely. So, last but not least, my final tip is dictation. So, let's take a look at that. So, most devices have this built into them, and it works for note taking in Jane. If you're someone who would rather speak aloud to your notes, this is going to be a fabulous function for you. To use dictation on a Windows device, you're going to open up a chart note box like we have here. Hold down the Windows key and press H to trigger the dictation toolbar. You can now dictate your text. When you're done, you'll press the Windows key again and H to turn off the dictation toolbar. On a Mac, which I'll show you here, we're going to head on over to the system preferences and click on the keyboard icon. I already have mine set up, so we'll refresh that in just a moment. But from there, you're going to select the dictation tab and find the drop-down menu where you can choose the dictation keys that you prefer or find out which ones are currently enabled on your own device. On Macs, we typically find that pressing the function key twice enables dictation. And if that doesn't work, you can also try hitting the control key twice. That's a popular setting too. But it is best to take a quick peek into your system preferences to be sure. On mine, I can tap function twice, and my icon is now there to enable dictation. It's going to read it for me and pop that right into my chart entry. And then I'm all set. Once you have your quick keys, you can head on over to any note box and be able to start dictating your charting notes. I'll pull that up again for us so that you can see what that looks like. Here we go. So before we move over to a Q&A, I want to recap what we chatted about today. So first, we went over how to find and build templates tailor-made for you from the staff profile. Next, we discussed how to chart from the day view so that all your notes are associated with your appointments. Finally, we covered some advanced tips like treatment plans, medical alerts, and dictation. I see we had a few questions come in through the chat, so let's jump into a few of those, and I'll pass it back off to Destin.
Amazing. Thank you so much to you both. That was such an incredible session. We do have quite a few questions that came in through the Q&A and through the chat. I'm wondering if maybe you both just want to take a quick scroll and see if there's anything in there recently, and if anyone wants to add any new questions that might be easy for us to answer in the last few minutes. I know that our team has been busy answering questions both in the chat and Q&A. And so I think that they did a really great job of that. And Jane team that's in the chat as well. If there's anything that you saw that came up that you thought would be really great for us to answer here at the end of the webinar, please feel free to flag it up to us as well.
See, great question there from Kelly for a combination of dictation and phrases. Absolutely. You can absolutely combine that. You would essentially just turn on your dictation for the parts that you would like to speak to, turn that function back off, and then be able to insert your phrases as you need to.
I'm also seeing a question coming in here. Can we cover how to archive a chart entry? Certainly we can do that. So for any entry at the bottom, if you scroll down and click the little cogwheel icon here, you'll have the option to delete that chart entry if it's one that you have already signed. And if it's still just a draft, you're going to be able to go in and archive that entry. So I hope that answers that question.
Oh, there is a question here. Melanie asks, how do we delete an accidental opened chart? And then Chloe echoed, yes, this happens a fair amount. Is that something that's possible?
Yeah, really good question. So as I mentioned previously, if it is currently an open draft, so let's open up our draft entry here, and I scroll down and I select that little cogwheel icon here, I can archive that chart draft. The difference between archiving a chart draft and deleting a chart entry, there isn't a difference. It's just that for for your own basically so you know what it is you're deleting or taking away from your entries here, we've just changed the title on it. So we archive a chart draft, but we delete a chart entry. And it's just so that when you scroll down to that area, if you're not already aware that this is a completed entry, you'll know because it'll say delete chart entry. Does that answer? I hope that answers that question.
Perfect. That's great. Well, I think we have hit time, and I know people have things to get back to today. So we really appreciate you taking the time with us today.